Oh, okay. Yeah, that's good for me, man. I'm gonna be not playing that, but. Control volume like that over there. Okay. That's perfect. Okay. Yeah, I just need it to be nice and low, friendly, atmospheric stuff. And then be able to take them. Okay, everybody, welcome to the Oh God. I'm gonna go ahead and get these things ready to go. Okay. Hi everybody. That's Mr. CreepyPasta. Does a great job. He's wonderful, isn't he? This is my best friend in the whole wide world. This is Billy. And he's my co-host for the show on YouTube, Mr. CreepyPasta Storytime. And me. Hi kids, it's me, Mr. CreepyPasta from Mr. CreepyPasta Storytime on YouTube. Hi! If you guys have shown up here because you thought that this was going to be some kind of food panel, you're incorrect. This is CreepyPasta Storytime. What I'm going to be doing is telling you guys some of the grossest and most fun stories that I think that I've been able to have off of YouTube, as well as some of my writer friends have put together some of their weirder stories they didn't really want to put into their books because they thought that they were terrible, and I love them, so I'm going to be telling them here as well. So I've got a couple of stories that I've got lined up. Main one being one of the scariest stories I think I've ever told ever. And I always love opening up with this one because it's literally the most terrifying tale that ever exists. Oh my God, I was just about to ask to see if we can make it darker in here, and that's wonderful. Oh, hello. I've never been like this before. Okay, cool. This is new for me, okay? Okay, you guys ready for the scariest story that was ever told? Okay. Gotta get my storytelling voice. Once, I wanted to play Mario, but I didn't have a Nintendo for it, and I was at a flea market. This old man I saw had Mario and a Nintendo, but the label was not there. Also, the man said it was owned by a dead kid named Jim. I said whatever because I was eager to play Mario on my new Nintendo. I plugged it in and everything seemed normal. I played World 1-1 and did it. Then I tried the old warp pipe trick, and when I got to the pipes, instead of the usual text that said, "Welcome to the warp zone," it said, "Welcome to the scary hell place." I thought that was weird. But then I said whatever and used the farthest pipe. The intro screen showed the words, "Death World 666. The graphics seemed off, and it sounded like screams happened from the game. It was super scary. But I wasn't scared, and I kept playing. After a while, I hit a place where it was impossible to pass because of spikes, so I had to die. I kept trying until my lives were at 0. I thought it would be game over, but Mario came back, and this time it looked like his face was bloody. As I started playing the level, it turned into a hidden cloud level, and it looked like Mario had angel wings. A spooky digital voice came out of the Nintendo that sounded like it said, "No hope." As I was about to grab a mushroom, the screen went to black. I reset the Nintendo and the game came up. This time the screen was different, and Mario's face was bloody. It scared me so bad that I had to reset it again. As it came on, the digital voice said, "You can't run from the funk." The screen was hyper-realistic, and it showed Mario again, only this time his face was me and my family's face, and we were skeletons. It was so realistic, I couldn't believe it. I was compelled to try the game again. This time I started it. As the first Goomba walked towards Mario, Mario turned toward the screen and started screaming, "No mas! No mas!" It sounded like high-quality CD audio. I screamed and turned off the game. I put it away, and later that week, I noticed my family acting distantly. I decided to research Mario games, and I found out that Mario was in a secret game that was only released in 2 arcades on Friday the 13th of June 6th, 1997. It seemed weird, so I started playing the game again. I decided to put in the Mario game again. I loaded it up to my save file. I clicked it, and Mario said, "Why a you, a no, a stop, a play, a my, a game." I didn't take his warning, and I played anyway. I got up to Bowser and I won, but when I got to Peach, there was just Toad there instead, and he said, "Peach is dead." And then a ghost face came up, and it had Princess Peach's face, who was a lady. I reset the game for the last time. I opened up my save, and it changed from my name. It said, "Jim died, bro." And then my mom walked in, and she screamed because I was dead the whole time, and guess what? My name was Jim. So anyway, I don't have this game anymore. I don't know if anyone's experienced anything like that. My mom sold it at a garage sale, but you should believe me because it's true. So haunting most Mario. The scariest story that I have ever told. No, that's obviously, it's a crappy pasta. That's not really a creepypasta. You guys who are in here, hopefully you guys know who I am. I'm Mr. CreepyPasta. I tell scary stories online with the accompaniment of piano music, who is Muji. That's what you guys are hearing over here. With my best friend in the whole wide world, Billy, who is also my roommate. He normally does the backup vocals, though. But you guys are wondering what a creepypasta is. It's really a urban legend, like this newfangled urban legend that's come around the internet. Things that are copied and pasted, or copied and pasted, all over the place. In case nobody made that connection before. Hopefully you guys know who I am. Anybody knows who they are? Raise up your hand. Cool, I can't see you, it's too dark. If you don't know who I am, hopefully that you will by the end of this. You'll enjoy yourself, and you'll come check me out over in the exhibitors hall. I've got a couple different things that I do. Essentially, what I do is do free audiobooks, and I also do real audiobooks. So there's a story I like to do that's closer to being like old-style urban legend. Actually, no, I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to do this one. Anybody afraid of spiders? Cool. Strap in. I guess reliving that night and putting my experiences on paper will help me get over the trauma. See, a few years ago, I was in a motorcycle accident. Broke my left tibia, fibula, shattered my right side of my pelvis, got a green fracture on my left femur, multiple fractures, breaks in almost all of my ribs, 2 broken collarbones. I was immobilized from the shoulders down by a heavy body cast. And they told me that I was lucky. My wife, Violet, was supportive and nurturing. She never once complained about having to care for me. She cooked all my meals, kept me company, and emptied my bedpan without grimacing. But 2 weeks into my state, Jenna, our daughter, called us, bawling because her college roommate had died. Vi had to leave immediately and be there for her. So Vi's sister, Kathy, was going to take care of me. When I woke up the following morning, Vi was off to get Jenna, and Kathy was there cheerfully making breakfast and talking up a storm. And she helped me with my more embarrassing biological needs, and like her sister, she never made me feel ashamed. She left around 11 that night and told me that she'd be back at dawn. See, I like to sleep with the TV on. For some reason, I find it comforting. I'd drift off while the game was finishing up, and only woke up when I felt something thud against my chest. In the flickering light of the television, I saw a huntsman spider staring back at me. Now, she was bigger than most of the ones that I'd seen around here, and maybe the length of a rugby ball. My breath caught in my throat, and every muscle in my body fired in an attempt to push the thing off of me, but I couldn't move. I started yelling at the spider, hoping that it might scare her away. She wasn't frightened. She turned around, exposing her abdomen to me, and I gasped. Her back and belly were covered in babies. They rippled like windblown fur as they moved over her mother's body. The huntsman turned back toward me and walked closer to my face. Before then, I'd never thought about spiders having a scent, but this one did. It smelled like wet dirt, sort of like how outside smells after a rainstorm. The smell intensified as its long legs reached my face. I squeezed my mouth and eyes shut. Its prickly legs advanced, first to my lower lip, then my nose, my eyelids, and finally my forehead. Its leg span stretched from ear to ear, hairline to chin. Its thick, heavy body ran from my chin to right between my eyes, and it stayed there. I tried to hold my breath. To say I was horrified was an understatement. I wished I was dead. I prayed to be dead. And my prayers went unanswered. As it walked a little higher, letting its abdomen brush against my nose, I sneezed. The huntsman immediately buried its fangs into my forehead as her baby streamed from her abdomen onto my face. I shrieked, tiny spiders crawling over my cheeks, squirming through my beard, and hid in my eyelashes. I thrashed my head back and forth in an attempt to get them off me. The mother moved onto the pillow by my right ear and bit my cheek. It felt like a wasp sting. And then she ran over to my shoulder and pushed herself through the tiny opening of the cast by my armpit. At this point, I was screaming uncontrollably. A sea of baby arachnids explored my nostrils, my hair, and were starting to find my ears. I felt a tendon or ligament or something snap as I thrashed, sending white-hot pain through my neck. Trying to move my head after that was excruciating. As the babies dispersed throughout my face and head, the mother explored under the cast. To this day, I have no idea how she was able to compress herself to fit underneath the thing. She wandered over my chest to my stomach and down to my groin, and she exited the cast by a hole nearby, only to move back inside by my legs. She stopped at the underside of my knee, and that's where she stayed. When Kathy arrived in the morning, I'd somehow fallen asleep. I guess the exhaustion brought on by the horror that I'd experienced forced my body to shut down, even though my mind was still soaked with terror. Oblivious to the events of the night before, Kathy shook me awake. I started screaming again. I felt the huntsman behind my knee. She must have been sleeping too. And startled awake by my yelling, she bit my leg over and over as Kathy tried to calm me down and tried to get me to tell her what was happening. Well, by the time I was able to tell her, she looked like she was about to faint. I'd always considered myself somewhat of an arachnophobe, but Kathy's fear was light years beyond my own. She called emergency services, and they sent a couple of guys who were able to coax the thing out and kill her. So, in the end, I guess it was anticlimactic. Vi came home with Jenna later in the day, and Kathy and I told her about my night. Now, neither of them was able to listen to the details. A family of arachnophobes. Time went by, and my broken bones knitted together and healed. And eventually, I was back on my motorcycle. Every night, though, I dream about the huntsman spider staring at me. I feel her young streaming across my face and up my nose and around the gaps of my teeth. And whenever there's a quiet moment, I hear them scratching at my eardrums. And I'd swear that every time I clean my ears, I'm pulling out eggs. It's a body cast by Max Lobdell. Next, Max has a wonderful ability to tell stories that are incredibly disgusting about insects. This is just many of the ones that I have, one of my favorites from him. However, if you guys ever watch my YouTube channel, Mr CreepyPasta, it has one of my absolute favorites from him about a guy who has egg sacs of spiders that are implanted in, and they shoot out of him. It's great. It's a great story. I can't tell it here. So what I was saying before was that I actually really love storytelling. I love the art of storytelling. And Well, I actually really got into this when I was a kid. When I was a kid, and I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys did this, probably like in your English class or something like that, there was a storyteller that came around Halloween or in October, and they would like sit down in the library or whatever, and they tell everybody stories about like, oh, this is Talipo. Like, you know, like the little creature comes in and the guy sends his dogs out, and he does it in the spooky voice. It's meant to like actually like frighten kids and stuff like that, because it's an old like campfire story. And I loved that kind of thing. When I was a kid and that happened to me, I had the crap scared out of me in the worst possible way. Like, I was terrified to sleep. And I've always wanted to be able to relive one of those things. So G.R. Wilson wrote a book called Right Behind You. And in that one, he wrote a story called The Golden Arm. Was anybody able to see me last year when I was here at MomoCon? Oh, cool. So a good number of people here. I told this story called The Golden Arm last year, and you guys, apologize if you were there for that panel, because I'm about to tell it again, but this is honestly one of my favorite ones to do, so please don't ruin it, don't spoil it for anybody if you know what's going to happen. Let's see. In 1880s Georgia, there lived a wealthy young woman in a grand plantation house. The woman's name was Annabelle Walters, and she inherited her fortune from her father, who made his money in cotton farming. Her father had been cruel to his slaves, but tender to his wife and daughter, and in 1864, baby Annabelle almost died in a fire. Her mother saved her from death, but could not save her left arm, which was so badly burned that it had to be amputated. The rest of Annabelle's body and her pretty face remained unscathed, but her father wanted the replacement for her arm to be as beautiful and perfect as the rest of her. So when Annabelle was a teenager, her father had an arm cast out of solid gold, and everyone marveled at how shiny, yet how lifelike Annabelle's new arm was, even if it was cold and artificial. Annabelle's mother died of fever not long after the casting of the golden arm. And a few years after that, her father died in a steamboat explosion. And so, young, lovely Annabelle Walters lived by herself in her family's old mansion with only an old dog named Ranger to keep her company. Of course, many bachelors wanted to marry Miss Walters for her wealth. They talked of love and affection, but Annabelle was no fool and turned away many a scheming suitor. But George was different. His family didn't come from wealth. He had been a self-made rancher out west, but most importantly, he truly loved Annabelle for who she was and not for her money. The two wed and shared several happy years together. And then, one dreary October, Annabelle fell sick with the same fever that killed her mother. The doctors, the best and most expensive doctors in the country, did all they could, but could not save her. So by mid-November, lovely Annabelle lay on her deathbed, her beloved George beside her in the final hours. "George, darling, before I pass, I have one last request to impart upon you," she said. "Yes, my love, anything. What is it?" he replied. "My arm. My golden arm. It's my most precious possession, more important to me than this house or any of my jewelry. Please, bury me in the ground with my golden arm," said Annabelle. "Yes, Annabelle, if that's what you wish, then I shall," said George. "Promise me, George. It's my final will upon this earth," she said. George gulped before replying. I promise to bury you with your golden arm, darling." Annabelle fell silent and was dead within a few minutes. George and Annabelle's cousins were the only ones to attend her funeral, and she was buried in the Walters family cemetery down the road from the mansion. In accordance with his wife's last will, George buried Annabelle with her golden arm. The night following the burial, George was sitting in front of the fireplace, Ranger the dog asleep at his side. He thought about his future, his love life, his living arrangements. Then he thought about his financial situation. And neither him nor, of course, Annabelle had worked a day during their whole marriage. The Walters family fortune had paid for all that they wanted, but that money, between the doctor's fees and Annabelle's lavish headstone, well, that money was nearly gone. George had become lazy and accustomed to the leisured life. If only there was another way towards wealth. And then he remembered the golden arm. See, that arm was made of solid gold. It must be worth a small fortune itself, he thought. But it was already buried with its owner, as per her final will. But wouldn't Annabelle want George to be happy and not destitute? And wasn't she a bit delirious towards the end there with that fever thrashing about her brain? Surely, George thought, surely she wasn't thinking straight. And now, she was dead. He couldn't care whether she was buried with a golden arm or not. George made a decision. He put on his cloak, for the air was chilled that November night. And he brought a lantern, for the sky and the road were as dark as a cave. He creaked open the door to the tool shed and grabbed the shovel, the strongest looking one that he could find, for he would have 6 feet down to dig through cold, hard ground. The sky was filled with clouds. No moon nor stars greeted George on his solitary march to Annabelle's grave. The wind whispered through the grass and the naked branches like the voices of creatures best unseen. George hugged his cloak tight around him, and he held his lantern high. Within his tiny circle of yellow light, shadows danced like madmen, and George felt his heart quicken as he approached the cemetery. George found the right headstone and plunged his shovel into the hard earth. The work got harder with each shovelful of dirt, but George worked faster as the wind picked up, and he shivered, thinking of the fire back inside. Sooner than George expected, the shovel thud against wood. George cleared away the final layer of soil and opened the coffin, and there lay Annabelle, as fair and as beautiful as in the prime of her life. Clasped across her chest, her golden arm shimmered in the lantern light. Pushing aside flimsy thoughts of betrayal and robbery, George snatched the arm and slammed the coffin shut. The arm was cold as ice, and George set it beside him as he shoveled the dirt back on top of his wife. Then he scooped up his treasure, and he began the long walk back to his house. The wind grew stronger and stronger as he walked, gusting against his cloak and making the lantern sway in his hand. The wind whistled, and George thought he heard a voice carried high and faint across the fields. He froze, eyes wide, glancing to one side and then the other. He saw no one, but with each step on the frosty ground, the wind's voice grew more distinct. "Who's got my golden arm?" George hurried his walk, but the words followed him louder and louder. "Who's got my golden arm?" The terrified man at last reached the mansion's door, which he flung open, slammed, and locked behind him. He ran to the parlor, where a ranger's ears perked up and the friendly hound dog greeted its master. The fire was down to embers, but even then that small heat felt wonderful as George dropped his shovel and sat down. Then he heard that ghastly voice again. "Who's got my golden arm?" George couldn't place the sound source. It seemed to be coming from the chimney, the windows, the door, all at once. He clutched the heavy, cursed golden arm close to himself and ran to the window to shut the curtains, but still, the forlorn and angry cry continued. "Who's got my golden arm?" Ranger barked and growled at the east wall, the one facing the cemetery. The windows, the doors, all at once. The boards of the house creaked and moaned, and the windows rattled. That voice went on louder than ever. "Who's got my golden arm?" A gust of wind came straight down the chimney and put out the embers, and George ran with that golden arm upstairs, down the hall to his bedroom, his heart thumping and his teeth chattering. Ranger's bark boomed and then was overpowered by the slam of the front door being thrown off of its hinges. The wind screamed through the house. "Who's got my golden arm?" George threw himself onto the bed sheets, clutching that icy, cursed golden arm, and it felt heavy as iron, and he could feel the slam of the door being thrown open. And then the wind stopped. There was silence, followed by slow, shuffling steps and tiny thuds as pieces of frozen grave dirt fell to the floor. George held his breath and prayed silently as the ghastly footsteps stopped just next to his bed. "Who's got my golden arm?" "You've got it!" The Golden Arm by Jared Wilson. Did I get you? Nice. Let's see, something gross? Something gross? Yeah? Did I hear something gross? You want to do a spookier one? Okay. So there's a book that I have out. There's a book that I have out called the CreepyPasta Collection. And in that book, there's a whole bunch of these authors that I've worked with. All these guys are my friends. They've all come together. They've all done books that have either been self-published or they haven't been published at all. And they're all like wonderful people. Yeah, thanks, Jeff. They're all like really wonderful people. They're incredibly talented. And there's a story that I love from that one that I'm going to go ahead and do for you guys. It's called The Voices in the Spirit Box. And this one, I'm not too sure if I say any curse words in it, but if I do, I apologize that I cursed during the middle of the day instead of nighttime. When I was 17, my mother was murdered. This story isn't about her. I should probably turn the music back on. Seems important. Now, this story is about what happened afterward. About a year after my mother's funeral, my dad started mentioning that she would come and visit him at night. She said she glowed in a pure white light and reached out to him with a warm smile on her face. He said that she looked just the way that she did the last time that he saw her. Now, before she left the store on that last night of her life, see, my sister and I both missed our mother very much. We wanted to believe that that was true. We did whatever we could to think of to try to contact her, but it was only my dad who ever saw her. So we just wanted to say goodbye. Ouija boards, spirit boxes, automatic writing, psychics, and mediums. We tried them all, and all proved to be little more than distractions. About 3 months into our efforts, my dad had his first blackout. He claimed it was just stress, but my sister and I agreed in confidence that it was more than that. He would forget things all the time, talk about old memories out of the blue, and then he would start getting those horrible migraines. We didn't learn the source of it all until he finally agreed to go to the doctor, and he had a brain tumor. It was inoperable. His doctor told us that it was the likely source that he'd been experiencing, including the hallucinations of his dead wife. And my sister and I lost all hope of ever saying goodbye to our mom and focused on my dad instead. By then, I was nearly 19 and my sister was 22. She ended up moving back in with Dad and helped me take care of him. Even with treatment, he only had 6 months though, which was 3 months longer than the prognosis. Our dad finally passed away when we were both devastated by it. I can still remember that night so vividly in my mind, the loneliness, the realization that both our parents were gone, and it was worse to realize that in all of our attempts to find proof of some kind of afterlife, we were finding nothing. Dad's loss to the both of us was really hard. And his last words were about Mom. She's telling me to come with her. And she looks so beautiful. So beautiful. My actual story starts almost a year later, though, when I finally decided to move out of my parents' house and in with my longtime girlfriend. Alex! I could hear my sister yelling from downstairs. She had moved back in with her boyfriend months ago, but I was home to help pack everything up. Alex, what do you want me to do with all of these? I poked my head out of the half-packed room and yelled back down to her, "Donate!" What? I sighed and went bounding down the stairs, taking the last 5 steps in a single jump, landing in the hallway. My sister stood in the kitchen doorway and repeated her question. "What do you want me to do with all these dishes?" "Donate. Clean your ears, Lily. I could hear you just fine." "Are you telling me to clean something?" That's a laugh. Lily spun around and went back to the kitchen, talking as she walked. "Are you sure you don't need any of this stuff?" "Nope. Clara has everything that we need in the dishes department." I followed her into the kitchen and saw her staring down at this beige plate decorated with a chicken and 2 ears of corn that sat below its feet. See, it was from our usual dining set. I remembered sitting down to dinner every night, those plates in front of me. "I think I want to keep one of these." Lily's eyes had misted over, and I knew how she felt. It was the little things that seemed to catch you. I smiled and walked over to her, placing my hand on her shoulder. Yeah, you should. Save one for me, too. She looked up at me and smiled. And suddenly we both felt something whiz behind our heads at a high speed and heard it crash against the far wall just below my mom's old cat clock. Lily nearly dropped the plate that she was holding, and she jumped back and let out a yelp. We had both been startled right out of our family moment, and I could feel my heart beating a mile a minute. She bent down and disappeared behind the tablecloth for a second before re-emerging with a piece of broken plate in her hand. See, she had a confused look on her face, one that I must have mirrored. We were the only two people in the house. No one else could have thrown that plate. On the sliver of porcelain Lily was holding, I could see a chicken's foot rising up from behind an ear of corn. It was from the same exact set that we had been discussing. You have to be kidding me, I said, turning my head to glance at the cupboard full of dishes and then back at Lily. She shrugged and gave me the, I don't know, look. That's when I noticed that the familiar ticking from my mother's cat clock, a sound that I'd been accustomed to hearing for years, had stopped. I looked up at the wall behind Lily and noticed the cat's tail had stopped swinging. Its always shifting eyes had frozen in place. I was staring directly at it, and it was staring directly at me. I shivered involuntarily and went to help Lily pick up the pieces of broken dish scattered about the floor. See, the plate incident reminded us of all the efforts to contact our mother. In all of our attempts, we never saw anything even remotely paranormal happen, yet here we were, face to face with an event that neither of us could explain. It didn't take long to decide that we should pursue it again. The incident had all cast doubt in the theory that my father had been hallucinating prior to his death. In our desperation, we eagerly jumped on the small chance to talk to them one more time. I know now that hope can be a dangerous thing. Lily and I went to our significant others and we explained what we were going to attempt. We wanted to give that Ouija board and the spirit box one more try. Clara was open to the idea, and I told her about it, and she actually seemed kind of excited. Lily had a hard time with David. As she related to me, she had to drag him along, kicking and screaming. But in the end, though, he showed up, and I knew that even if he didn't buy into any of it, he would be there for my sister. 2 nights later, we all gathered at my parents' house at the same time. We were excited, giddy. We had no idea what we were signing up for. If we had, I would have walked away from that place and never looked back. Is everybody ready? Lily asked, her fingers already resting on the top of the planchette. Clara looked at me, green eyes that darkened to a near black in the dim orange. She winked at me and put her hand on the planchette next to Lily's. Then I placed my fingers on the other side of the plastic toy and did my best to ignore the disapproving look on David's face. He had been reluctantly agreed to be our scribe, writing down the word that might be spelled out during the seance. Lily started moving the planchette around the board in the infinity shape that we had always used before. I could feel that exact same excitement welling up inside of me that I had had the first time that we had tried to do this. I could see the same fervor reflected in my sister's expression. What now? Clara whispered over the board. Now we ask some questions. Lily held her head high like she was trying to channel some kind of divine energy. My sister always got a little bit too into this. Is there anyone here with us? We all watched the board with bated breath, hoping to feel some movement beneath our fingers. And suddenly the infinity shape stopped, and we watched the planchette moving slowly across the board towards the top left corner before stopping at the word yes. Okay, you guys are fucking with me, right? Because I didn't do that. Clara was looking at me again. I could see out of the corner of my eye. I was stunned in the million times that we tried this. Nothing had ever actually happened at all. No, we are not fucking with you. Ask another question. Lily's voice had gone up at least 2 octaves, and she was smiling like a crazy person. It was the same look that she would get on Christmas morning when we were kids, the joy of discovery and the satisfaction of finally getting what you were waiting for. What's your name? I asked, diving right in. This is going to be the moment of truth. I was surprised at just how quickly the planchette started moving around the board. We called out each letter as the planchette briefly stopped, and I heard David scribbling away. I-T-S-D-A-D-D-Y. It's Daddy? David murmured in the words that contrasted with his previous cool demeanor. Lily's hands left the planchette and she slapped them across her mouth. I could see her eyes quickly filling with tears. Clara and David both saw their slack-jawed, and I could I'm sure I looked very similar. Lily, put your hand back on the thing, I said weakly, feeling like the wind had been knocked out of me. Lily, put your hand back on. She did. When her hand left her face, I noticed the smile that she'd been hiding. Dad, is that really you? Lily choked out. Yes. The response was immediate. We miss you so much, Dad. It's been so hard since you and Mom have been gone. W-E-M-I-S-S. We miss you too. Oh, holy crap. Clara couldn't contain herself any longer, and I found myself smiling at the use of the word we. Dad! I couldn't even hope to disguise the excitement in my voice. Is Mom there with you? Yes. My sister, now suffering through full-blown sobs of joy, leaned her head over and rested it on David's shoulder. He stared down at the notepad, rereading the words, barely registering that she was there. I didn't know if he was stunned by what he was seeing or horrified at how deluded that we all were. David had never been much of a believer. Dad, can Mom talk to us? I wanted to keep this dialogue going. I-M-S-O-R-R-Y. I'm sorry? I'm sorry. I raised an eyebrow at the response. What are you sorry about? I asked, unsure if I was speaking with my mother or my father. S-H-E-S-T. Oh, she's too cold. Too hard for her. A smile fell from Lily's face, and the mood of the room became more solemn as David read the last sentence out loud. The planchette continued to move then without any more prompting. So cold here. So lonely. We miss you. We miss you. It's Dad. Please help. Please, we need you. And after the last you, the planchette suddenly shot out from under our hands, paused just milliseconds over goodbye, and then fired across the room and hit the wall at roughly the same speed as the plate was moving. I jumped up and away from the board in shock. Lily was now sobbing loudly as David held her, but his eyes remained fixed on the board as if it were the most alien object that he'd ever seen. Clara touched my hand with shaking fingers, and I looked down to see fear in her eyes. I don't understand, Clara said, and stood up. I'm so sorry. She wrapped her arms around me, and it was only then that I noticed the wetness on my own cheeks. I haven't cried since my mom's murder, and I figured something in me broke that day. Even when Dad passed, I didn't cry. Now, though, in this moment, the tears finally came. We tried to contact my parents all night, but the planchette didn't move again. We hoped contact with our parents would make us feel better, give us some sense of closure, but instead it just devastated us. Lily most of all. Most days she would sit in the living room for hours listening to the static on the spirit box, hoping to hear a voice. As the weeks went on, Lily became quieter and more introverted. She retreated into herself, hardly speaking to anyone. The conversation with the Ouija board had made an impression on me too, but Lily had become obsessed. I gradually became less interested in contacting our parents again and more concerned about my sister's mental state. And then one night, I woke from that nightmare to a more real, more horrifying one. I answered my ringing phone to hear David's voice yelling through the earpiece. Alex, your sister just took off. Took off? What do you mean? David's tone was panicked, and I rubbed the sleep out of my eyes and tried to focus. Alex, she's been way worse since she's let on. Lily doesn't sleep anymore. She just sits in the kitchen and listens to that damn little radio. The spirit box? Yeah, that stupid thing. She says that she could hear your parents talking to her. I want to believe her, man, but I sat for hours with her one night and didn't hear a single thing. Jesus. Alex, I'm scared for her. Tonight, she was listening to it and talking back to it. Her voice woke me up. I couldn't understand exactly what she said, but she was crying, and then I heard her bolt out the door and slam it behind her. She went back to my parents' house. It wasn't a question. I could feel it in my bones. I may not have known the full extent of what was happening, but I did know that something very, very bad had just happened to my sister. She couldn't cope with the Ouija board. And after all these years of suppressed sadness, she had just cracked. You think? Well, that's what I'm thinking too. So I know you have keys, man. Can you meet me there? I think we need to help her. I sighed into the phone, knowing that he was right. Lily may never forgive us, but I was quickly becoming convinced that she needed professional care. The weight of the decision to admit her somewhere felt smothering. I looked down at Clara, who was awake, staring warily. Lines of worry etched onto her face. Yeah, just let me get dressed. I can be at my parents' house in about 45 minutes. Let me see if I can talk to Lily. Thanks, Alex. I'm gonna head over now. I'm a lot closer, so I'll let you know. We hung up, and I relayed the entire conversation to Clara. Despite my best efforts to keep her safe at home, she insisted on going with me, and when I protested, she challenged me to try and stop her. 10 minutes later, we were in the car heading to my old house. Now, the argument with Clara was only a slight delay on my departure, and we actually arrived at the house more than an hour later. Both Lily and David's cars were parked in the driveway, so I parked on the street, and Clara and I headed up to the front door. I noticed she had climbed the porch steps, that there was no light that was on inside the house. The front door was slightly ajar. I took a deep breath before pushing it all the way open with a creak. Beyond the door was utter blackness. A seeming void instead of a welcoming foyer. I had never seen a house this dark before. As I let my eyes adjust, I listened intently for any sound. And all I could hear was the clicking of that spirit box rapidly changing channels through the soft static. I finally stepped inside and made my way down the hall, taking Clara's hand as she followed behind me. "Lily!" I yelled out, and I heard the acute fear in my weak, shaking voice. I couldn't understand why I was so terrified of my own house, but I couldn't shake the feeling. I hugged the walls until we rounded the corner into the soft-lit living room. A dull blue light was emanating from somewhere, and I could see Lily sitting in front of it. She was cross-legged on the floor, the spirit box in front of her, and her head was hung between her shoulder blades, blonde hair covering her face. "Lily?" I whispered to her when Clara suddenly flipped on the light switch, and she screamed. I was blinded at first and disoriented by the screaming, but my eyes gradually made the adjustment. I blinked a few more times and found myself facing Lily, who had remained sitting on the floor with the spirit box in front of her. Her forearms were cut to the elbow, and she was sitting in a pool of blood. David was there, lying next to her, stabbed God knows how many times in the chest, neck, and face. I can only assume it was him, as the body was unrecognizable. I could hear Clara taking off down the hallway and slamming the front door as she left the house. As I adjusted to my state of absolute shock, I scanned the room calmly before hysteria set in. The walls were covered in writing, the same three phrases over and over again, written in fresh blood. "It's Dad. We miss you. We need you." I snapped out of the trance suddenly and stumbled over to Lily. I begged every god that I had ever heard of to let her still be alive somehow, to let me save her. I choked on my prayers as I rescued Lily's limp body from the crimson puddle and screamed for Clara to call 911. Her skin lacked the warmth of life, and I pressed my face to hers, begging her to wake up. My whispers falling on dead ears, I cried. The soft static of the spirit box played the score to my pain. How many eternities passed before Clara returned? I didn't know, but I saw her there, finally standing in the doorway, talking to an emergency service man and staring at us. I cradled Lily's body, rocking back and forth. I could tell from the look of disgust and pity set on Clara's face. But she couldn't hear the sounds coming from the spirit box. "Alex, it's Mommy. We need you." It was faint, but it was there. My mother's voice was unmistakable. A year later, when the detectives finally called to let me know that they were releasing my sister's things, I brought that spirit box home. I didn't let Clara know that I had it. She had never quite recovered from what she'd seen that night of the murder-suicide, and the media had called Lily's case a tragic descent into madness. Clara and I couldn't have agreed more, but sometimes late at night when Clara's asleep, I slip out of bed and I sneak into the living room and I pull the spirit box out from behind the stack of books and I turn it on just for a few seconds. But in those moments I listen closely to the clicking sounds of the radio, scanning through the static. I strain my ears to hear their words. The voices of my family. They're there. They say that we will all be happy. In a few seconds, I hear them saying so many things. They tell me that they need me, that they love me, that it's lonely without me. They claim that it's cold. They beg me to join them. Lily says it's easy and that I should bring Clara with me. But there's something behind their voices. Something that sometimes bleeds through. Lily must have either ignored the sound or blocked it out completely. Beneath their warm invitations and desperate pleas, I can hear something laughing. Something inhuman. It's The Voices in the Spirit Box by Michael Marks. Okay, cool, sweet. I have enough just to do one more, and I love doing this story whenever I do these conventions because it's goddamn best. Let's see. So, a lot of you guys probably know that I have a friend named Vincent Venicava. He's hilarious. He's a great writer. Oh, gotcha. So, he's a great writer. He's a great friend of mine. And he wrote the story. It's incredibly short. It's the last one I read because I always love reading this one. It's called Thoughts of a Modest Murderer. She's making her way to the bathroom. It won't be long now before I have my first kill. Oh, this is so exciting. Okay, just like I planned, I stand here in the shower with my knife ready and drawn, and when she pulls back the curtain, well, it'll be curtains for her. I made it funny. There she is. I'm just going to take a little peek so I can get into the perfect position to pounce. Well, isn't this a treat? She's undressing in front of me. Okay. Go ahead and slip out of the jeans. I'm just gonna enjoy stabbing my knife into you, honey. Okay, time to get ready. She's approaching the shower now. Here she comes. She's sitting on the toilet. I wish I could give her some privacy, but this is kind of a unique situation. I guess everything will be just fine, just as long as... Oh, God. Is she taking... Oh, she is. Oh, I'm afraid this is terribly embarrassing. Lord, it stinks in here. I honestly didn't know the human body was capable of creating a stench so foul. Oh, what the hell did she have for lunch today? Ugh. Smells like 3-week-old cat food that's been left in a dumpster behind a sushi restaurant. Oh, I could taste it. Oh, Jesus, why can I taste it? How about a courtesy flush there, darling? Oh, you're raised in a barn? Never mind, that even barn animals would be offended by this putrid concoction you're brewing inside that pungent porcelain pot you're sitting on. Oh, God, she's picking her nose now. That's it. This woman's lost all sex appeal as far as I'm concerned. Oh, Christ, she's really digging deep, isn't she? What the hell is she trying to do, scratch your brain? Oh, no, don't you do it. Don't you do it. Don't you eat that booger, young lady. She ate it. Unbelievable. Okay. Okay. Stiff upper lip. You can get through this. Sure, things haven't gone exactly as expected, but that doesn't mean this can't be a successful outing. She appears to be finishing up, anyway. Okay, straighten up. Wipe the tears from your eyes. Get back into position. You don't want a nickname like the Blubbering Butcher or the Crybaby Killer, do you? No, that's not scary. Okay. Now, of course, you'd wipe back to front. Nothing surprises me anymore. Wait. Oh, where are you going? No, don't you go. I think you might need a shower after dropping that bomb, Crapperella. Oh, you ain't clean. Oh, at least wash your hands. Thoughts of a Modest Murderer by Vincent Venicava. Thank you guys. Thank you guys so much for coming out to see me for the Creepypasta Storytime. I really appreciate it. I hope you all had fun and you got spooked. Come see me at the exhibit hall. I'm down in aisle 700.